Coming up, the top 50 free agent class is on the board, and the New York Football Giants have two players both in the spotlight for big decisions this offseason for Joe Schoen and the front office. Should they bring them back? Where do they rank? And ultimately, are there other players on the market that Big Blue should have their eye on? We dive in on that, plus the QB class, all coming up next. Yes, my friends, it is OGP, the One Giant podcast where you know that we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, the healthy, wealthy, and wise Andrew Makowitz, who may, if he's looking to keep that well-being in peak performance, be over on potential.com. That's because it is an easy online assessment tool, basically a survey that benchmarks and tracks your well-being and also gives you coaching to improve it. You can see how your progress improves over time. It's 100% free for individual users, Andy. I assume that you want to be in peak form here going into free agency for the Giants.
Of course. And you'd have to think that it would be beneficial for Saquon Barkley, Xavier McKinney, Joe Schoen to be using potential. Knowing that well-being is important, these negotiations may get tough, Adam. It feels like everyone needs to have their head in the right spot.
You better believe it, buddy. All of the New York Football Giants fan base. Check out Potential over at Pietential, potential.com. Go get yourself a look there. Now, what we're going to be doing is talking about a nice little article that came out here on ESPN discussing the top 50 free agent class in the NFL as we work our way through. This was care of Matt Bowen, ESPN staff writer. Then he breaks down all these key figures, a lot of names we're going to recognize. But let's dive in from a Giants-centric perspective first. Two key free agents for Big Blue: Saquon Barkley, Xavier McKinney. Starting with the running back, starting with the contract. Andy, we know, I can't say where do you think he's ranked. He's ranked 27th overall in the top 50. Too high, too low, based on some of the players ahead of him. And then we'll get into, obviously, he is the top running back listed on the free agent market. But where do we think about from a value standpoint being mid-tier in the top 50?
Well, you were so close to finishing Goldilocks there, where you said too high, too low, or is he just right? Yes, exactly. You kind of missed it. And I actually think it is in the middle. And I didn't think I was going to say that because the way that Giants social media, the way that Giants fans have reacted about Saquon Barkley, like he's the cornerstone guy. He wants to retire as a Giant. He's amazing. He's explosive. But then when you look across the landscape of the league, he's not even in the top 20 guys that are available in free agency right now.
Sure.
So when you think about the pecking order, a lot of it has to do with the positional value at running back. A lot of it has to do with the injury concerns, and a lot of it has to do with how much money he's probably going to command on the open market and whether you can get 80 cents on the dollar from somewhere else and be able to put that cost savings somewhere else. So for me, I kind of have it in the just right area. Obviously, it feels right that he is the number one running back given his age and his explosiveness. How did you feel about seeing Saquon outside of the top 25?
Yeah, because we're talking about the other running backs that are listed here. But when you go, let's say, from the 20th to the 26th ahead of Saquon Barkley, it's worth noting that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 offensive linemen going from Mike Onwenu in New England, the offensive tackle. You've got Dotson, the guard there for the LA Rams. You've also got Jackson in Detroit. And then at 20, you've got Tyron Smith, well known with the Dallas Cowboys. So you think about that, and then you can even throw in, there's an edge rusher mixed in there with Grenard over there in Houston. Calvin Ridley, wide receiver. That's an interesting one we'll talk about along the way here potentially as well. But in the landscape of the other players, right? Because it's not just, well, what is he, Saquon Barkley, as an individual talent? It's where is the value? So my first thing is like when you see 4 offensive linemen in those 6, 7 picks ahead of them or names ahead of them, you go, yeah, of course, because guess what? Offensive line play is what makes the running back job so much easier and effective for a player like him.
Yeah, I mean, look at there's more than one way to do this. You look at Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. Like he's a guy that was a late round pick that they plugged in and started playing him over the first round draft pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that they drafted a year or two before that. So you can see
free agent Clyde Edwards-Helaire, by the way, I think, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's about that time for him to be up. I don't see him
See how
necessarily on the list.
little you care about Clyde
Clyde
Edward-Helaire now that
Edwards-Helaire.
Pacheco is successful. There you go.
He didn't look good when he was the starter. He didn't look good as a complimentary role. I don't know if he's someone that I'm very interested in for the Giants. Watch this happen where like the Giants let Saquon Barkley go and their big free agent signing is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That would be
Of course.
hilarious if I could myself, Adam. But yes, I look at how things go with the free agent running back market. It makes all the sense in the world for this to kind of be the case. I think you see the difference. So the way that I look at this is Saquon Barkley is explosive. He's a tremendous talent, but like you can get 80% of the production for a fraction of the price, whereas you don't feel like you can get the same type of deal at the offensive tackle position, at the edge rushing position, because it's so hard to be able to find those. And that's why those guys, offensive tackles, make $20+ million. Edge rushers make $20+ million because it is so hard to solve that problem. You can't just solve it with a guy off the street, which seems to happen quite frequently in the running back situation.
When the offensive line is good, then replacing talent is at least easier. It doesn't mean you're going to get, as you say, it's not going to be 100% replacement, but if you can find that value and spend money elsewhere, it matters. Just to drill down on it too, you go all the way through the top 50. There are others listed here. Austin Eckler is 49 there with the coming off the LA Chargers. You've got Tony Pollard from Dallas at 46, working up the board. You're going to come across two more running backs, the first of which is a little bit of a legend. He's called King Henry. Derrick Henry making his way out of Tennessee. Now he's obviously 30 years old. And then at 35, that's 37 for Derrick Henry. 35 is Josh Jacobs. And the only note I'll make here that I thought was interesting is if you go over, I think this is through Spot Track, when you looked at projecting contracts this offseason, Jacobs was the only free agent running back that got to the $10 million mark. Saquon Barkley was below him by, I think, $2 or $3 million in terms of projected value. Age seemed to be a really big determining factor there, but I do find it fascinating. I think ultimately you're splitting hairs a little bit, and you're saying, well, Saquon Barkley, elite level talent, maybe the injury risk, right? Only 2 full seasons over the course of his career so far. A year younger is Jacobs. So all these little things play a factor here. But listen, he's a top 30 talent. I think it's the right spot to be in. And I think positionally, that's exactly what you anticipate when you're looking at free agents at the running back spot.
I mean, shocking fall from grace. Austin Eckler, 49th on the list, Adam. Like he was one of those people that had that he set up the meeting for all the running backs to get together, put their heads together and figure out how they're going to get more money. And people got franchise tagged, no one got more money, and now his play declined just kind of how people expected as you get into your late 20s at the running back position. What is his free agent market going to be like? Is he going to be able to eclipse $7 million a year? I don't know at this point, given his decline, but he might be an alternative for teams that are going after someone like Saquon Barkley to say, oh, Saquon wants $13 million. We can get Austin Eckler for 6. Maybe that's a better way for us to financially figure out how to run our offense.
Let alone Swift not listed in the top 50. And I'm not saying he should be, but he's just kind of a name that's out there. And you go, well, what's his market going to be? And what's the price point going to be there? Certainly some options. And that's what makes, I hate to say that phone call so humorous about running backs trying to get together and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and reset this thing. There's just too many players at the position. There's too much talent, unfortunately, that makes it a bloated pool and easier for teams to make hard decisions. Now, I mentioned Josh Jacobs being there at 35. Sitting there at 34 is another New York Football Giant. So bright spot here is the Giants have 2 of the top 50 free agents on the market. The question mark is whether or not he'll be back. Xavier McKinney, 34th on the list here. We talked about versatility. We spent a little bit of time at the back end of the episode thinking about the Baltimore Ravens and their setup with Kyle Hamilton. How much did Bobby Okereke elevate or help to elevate Xavier McKinney? Price point matters here. How did you feel about where he landed in the hierarchy?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, we see how young he is. We see him emerging. He obviously played really well. You mentioned that we talked about it doesn't seem to be a coincidence that Bobby Okereke jumps in and all of a sudden Xavier McKinney looks like he can flourish, knowing that he's got such a strong tackler and playmaker in front of him in Okereke. Listen, Xavier McKinney entering next season is going to be 26 years old. He can cover. He's got good range. It's interesting because he's not the best safety on the board. We mentioned Antoine Winfield Jr. is ranked in the top 20. You have Kyle Duggar at 25, New England Patriots. He's going to be 28 years old. So, like, there are going to be potentials on the market, Adam. And Xavier McKinney says he wants to be paid as one of the best, which he should be saying that as you go into free agency. but who's going to be willing to put that price tag against Xavier McKinney? And what is that price tag going to look like?
Of course, we said, franchise tag north of 17. Some people projected, 10 million, said, no, that's too low, closer to 12. How many years is it going to be? And for the Giants, obviously, when we're talking about, we said this before, Saquon Barkley, Xavier McKinney, tag Saquon and pay McKinney. That's still a whole lot of money tied up. You're going to end up talking about a minimum 25 million tied up between those two positions going into the year. And we know that the 12.5 on a tag, at least in the case of Barkley, would be 100%. That's 100% on the cap. There's no mitigating or adjusting that. So it'd be interesting to see the choices that they make there. I also think too, you have some other guys. You mentioned Duggar there. He's 28. So, projecting age, value, talent, I think all these things become big factors. Going to be interesting to watch how it unfolds there with Xavier McKinney. From a top 50 perspective, Andy, let's just go ahead and give a couple before we get into the QB, because there's another good article that was over on ESPN talking about projecting what's going to happen on the QB market this offseason, and directly ties in to the New York Football Giants. In this top 25, let's just name a couple of guys that we found interesting. And can I just throw one out here real quick? This isn't one of my officials, but you know that Leonard Williams is a free agent? Do you know that the Giants got a second-round pick for Leonard Williams mid-season, and now he is on the market by Spot Track standards at about 16.7? I'm not telling you that's the logical fit, the smart fit. Ashawn Robinson might be the guy the Giants would naturally want to retain and bring back. But boy, again, in the all-time great GM moves, this would be it. We talk about this all the time. Yeah, sent you off as a rental to Seattle, and then I bring you right back in for a 2 or 3 year deal. Timeline doesn't add up. The money's not right. But I mean, listen, Big Cat coming back in the door. Why not?
Adam, I gotta say, I don't think a reunion with Leonard Williams makes much sense for the Giants.
Don't dwell on it. I just thought it was fun. I was just, I got a little excited.
It is in a vacuum, but it's like,
Yes.
man, he's probably going to get $15 million a year on a multi-year deal. And it's like the Giants with Dexter Lawrence and Ashawn Robinson, Jordan Riley back there, like, man, it feels like the allocation of funds is going to be critical. That's one of those where it would be great if he wants to take a hometown, quote unquote, hometown discount to come back to the Giants. But I feel like he's kind of priced himself out of being able to return.
He's the 16th on the top 50 list. If you told me that it was like a $10 or $11 million contract, I think it'd be a home run hit, and it would be the ultimate just true GM move. That being said, it's not even the guy that one of the guys I want to cover here. Who is your first player that you're keeping an eye on in the top 50 for Big Blue?
Okay, so ranked at number 14 on this list is a gentleman by the name of Robert Hunt. Robert Hunt, you may say, yes, Andy, I absolutely need him. Or you might say, who is Robert Hunt? What are you talking about, Andy? I've never heard that name before. And the reason why is because he is an offensive lineman, Adam. He is a guard from another team. It seems like most fans only know how they can yell at the guards that are on their current roster and not necessarily the guards that are playing on other teams. So I'm here to inform you. Robert Hunt will be 28 years old. He is a guy that's played for the Miami Dolphins for the last 4 years. Drafted in 2020, was a high second-round pick when he came out of Louisiana Lafayette. Adam, there's a couple of things that I like here. He is a very, very big individual, 6'6", 322 pounds, and he registered an 89.6 pass block win rate this year, which feels like something the Giants kind of need. And we talk about, do you want to spend money on the offensive line? I do again. It feels like not knowing if Justin Pugh is going to be back. Are they going to cut Mark Golinsky to get cap space? What's going on with the remaining guys? Is Joshua Zudu going to play there? What's going on with Marcus McCaden? Do we have any capable offensive linemen that can play the guard position? This screams to me like a home run. And I'll tell you one more reason why.
Here we go.
The last 3 years, and we know Pro Football Focus is not the be-all, end-all, but his PFF grade has consistently gone up every year that he's been in the league, from 63 to 73 to 77 in his contract year. So for me, he's an ascending player who is in the prime of his career. And Adam, it sounds like they're saying the projected contract from ESPN's Matt Bowen says about $8.5 million per year. A 4-year, $34 million deal is what he's projecting.
Yeah.
To me,
yeah,
if we could get a very capable ascending talent at the guard position for $8 million a year, how would you feel?
Send it. Send the check. Yeah, and
send
by
the
the
paperwork.
way, yeah, exactly. Paperwork's in the mail. Don't worry. E-signature, DocuSign. It's in the email. Go ahead and click that box. Let's get this bad boy out the door. 100%, man. When you talk about that position, we all know the offensive line has had struggles, right? We all know Glowinski's not the answer. We all know they have players, McKathan, right? Optimism, young guys. We need stability. We need consistency. Evan Neal is still going to be a mystery here. So just being able to bring in a known commodity. And you mentioned about a guy that is considered a top 15, 14th overall free agent. Now, maybe that number, let's just assume it gets inflated up to 10 or, $11 million. That's okay. And by the way, I'll tie this right back to the decisions about Xavier McKinney, the decisions about Saquon Barkley. We're presenting options of, if you don't pay them, maybe you can go pay this guy, right? So, how could you not be a massive fan of adding a player like Robert Hunt? Interesting to see how that unfolds. When we get to our free agency for the Giants perspective, maybe next week, talking about where the cap is, we'll also look at other teams, right? Can the Dolphins afford to pay and retain Robert Hunt? Who else do they need to sign? That's a big part of this free agent spectrum here when we get inside, not just top 50, but every single player that's going to be available. So home run hit for Andy out of the gates here. Now, again,
one more thing to add. One more thing to add about Robert Hunt, because I'm feeling very passionate about it today, Adam. You can cut Mark Lewinsky and save over $6 million against the cap. If I told you that you could cut Mark Lewinsky, save $6 million, then put that as the down payment for Hunt, making $9 million a year. So you essentially would be paying $3 million more to get a capable offensive guard in his prime, only ascending. To me, I feel like his value is going to go up as the offseason goes, because these types of players don't just grow on trees. I could see him end up creeping up into the $10 million per year, because you need capable offensive linemen. But to me, at his value right now, it's a home run.
Buddy, I gotta tell you, this might be your best episode ever. This might.
Thank you.
There's a world. I don't want to tell you one way or the other. Love to have you on here long term, but this might be the time to walk away. Right? Leave it on a high note. Oh, George Costanza, this thing. Always leave them wanting more. I love it, man. And there's going to be other names we'll talk about across the offensive line. But hey, if you can get this dude, especially if you transition cost value from Glowinski into someone you feel like has real stability, you have to love that option. Not too much further for me on one of my, first real legitimate ones. I did think about briefly looking at Chase Young, but I assume that the 49ers are going to bring him back, and I don't love it. Is he the most productive player? We'll see. The Super Bowl tells a lot about that. How about at 18, though? 18th overall player here, Bryce Huff, currently a New York Jet. Walk right across that field, buddy. Welcome into the actual owners of the stadium, New York Football Giants, Big Blue. He is coming off of, obviously, his most productive season, 10 sacks this past year, 29 combined tackles, 10 tackles for a loss, 10 assists, 21 QB hits. If you look at the Giants right now, and we know Kayvon Thibodeau is electric, and we believe he's an ascending player. But is Azeez Ojulari guaranteed to be a part of the long-term future for the Giants? Has he been productive and ultimately healthy enough to warrant another contract with Big Blue? If not, same thing about price point here, man. When I wander on over and I see $9.2 million AAV value on him, this again, if I'm not bringing back Xavier McKinney and I'm trusting Pinnock and I'm trusting going to go ahead and look our new defensive coordinator to make things happen on the back end of this defense. Maybe it's Jervarius Owens stepping up along with Dane Belton. But if I'm not going to spend $12 million on a multi-year deal, I'm looking right into the defensive front where they're going to have holes in terms of defensive tackle depth as well. But I want to strengthen it. I want to make Kayvon Thibodeau's life easier, and I want to make this a team that can get after the quarterback more consistently without having to dial up all of that pressure all of the time. Big notes here real quick on him. He went ahead and had only 7.5 sacks over his first 3 seasons. I mentioned having 10 this past year, and his pass rush win rate, 21.8%. That was top 10, 8th in the league. So this feels like race car and race car. Put 2 speedsters with each other and make this that version of Big Blue that we love to see. Pressure, front, doing the job, letting the secondary get to work.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, that is great. Bryce Huff signed a 1-year, $4 million deal to be able to play, and man, did he pay himself off. He is going to get paid. Like, he will. There's
the 9.2 seems low. I'm going to level with you. The 9.2 seems low. Nevertheless,
listen, I'm glad it's not you and me having to do the shopping, and it's Joe Schoen, because I'm
for
like,
sure.
what a bargain! Huff is at 9 million. What Hunt at 8.5? Like, let's get these guys in the building immediately. When it comes out and the demand is going to be high, you could see him poke up into $10 or $12 million
Sure.
as a pass rusher. Double digit sacks just don't grow on trees, and he is a guy obviously played in New York, had his final breakout season, was a little bit inconsistent the first couple of years, but this year really showed himself out. And he's going to get a 3-year contract on the open market. The Giants need pass rushing help. They have Kayvon Thibodeau. We don't know what Ojulari is going to bring to the Giants. He's been off injured and not necessarily putting up the numbers that we need. The Giants have to address the pass rushing situation. Getting someone like Huff would do that for the Giants instantly.
Now moving on into, I agree with you. Obviously, it was my pick. Moving on into other players here that we may keep an eye on. And by the way, I will just take a brief pause here before we talk about the QB room, because there's a very interesting discussion there I want to have. Just that, so whether or not it's these players, and even the two that we're listing here, let's assume that getting Hunt, if he was available, cost an extra $3 million more, right? Say it's $12 million for him on the AAV, and say that it's $12 million for Huff on the AAV. That's the equivalent of the money you're talking about spending on Saquon Barkley, spending on Xavier McKinney, at least something in that kind of range. If it's me, these aren't to be the perfect picks, but at a minimum, I think I would feel stronger than going to the draft, replacing running back value, looking in your own room, looking to the draft for safety help as well. You're swapping out one thing for the other in terms of cost, but I can get excited about what it means on both sides of the football. Why? It's building in the trenches, right? It's helping the defensive and offensive fronts. I did take a look. I want to hear if you have another one. I'm going through the list, and I had seen Calvin Ridley there. I'm thinking, wide receiver T. Higgins looks like maybe he's going to go a different direction. His coordinator's moved on, so maybe it pulls him somewhere else. I stopped on Michael Pittman Jr. because I was like, now here's a guy that has never quite lived up to it, but has the pedigree. And you go and you look at him now this past season, where he exploded. Last year, 99 receptions, but only 925 yards, right? QB play, whatever. 109 receptions this past year, 1,152 yards, 10 yards per catch, 4 touchdowns, 75-yard long, like really blossomed here, right? And then I went and looked at the price point. This is where you're not happy you're spending. Over $22 million AAV for Michael Pittman Jr. projected on his contract. Now, with good reason, because he's 17th overall on the top 50. He's 26 years old. You're talking about getting his prime. And if you go up the list here, Mike Evans at 31 is listed 12th overall. Other than that, it's just T. Higgins at 7, also at 25, going to be 26, entering his prime. That's the list. So, he is the third highest ranked available wide receiver. And even then, it is still the wide receiver position has just skyrocketed in terms of price point value.
I mean, Adam, I know that we're talking about free agents right now, but this is the reason why I lean towards going after a wide receiver earlier in the draft, because you see, once these guys to solve the problem in free agency costs a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
And when you think about how teams have assembled their wide receiver group, really only Tyreek Hill signing, after a trade has been one of the more successful ones. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, both drafted by the Rams. Godwin and Mike Evans, both drafted by the Bucs. It feels like, to be able to build out these rooms effectively, you have to go through the draft because it's so expensive. Michael Pittman Jr., $22 million.
I don't know what I thought the number was going to be, by the way. I just didn't think it was going to be that. Like, I knew it was going to be big, but I was like, if he's 16 million and T. Higgins is 23, 24 million, like 25, 20, you're getting like real value. And I was like, oh no, sorry. Like, I don't know why I tried to trick myself into thinking that'd be possible.
It was eye popping back in 2022 when Christian Kirk moved from the Arizona Cardinals to the Jacksonville. That was the one where everyone's like, the wide receiver room's drunk. Like, it's drunk right now. Something. Give this guy a water. Like, something is happening. And Adam, that deal was a 4-year, $72 million deal. Michael Pittman is easily getting more money than that. And that's the crazy part. If you figure a 4-year deal at $22 million, that's $88 million that Michael Pittman's going to be projected. Man, he's a great player. Is he a number one worth all the money? His production has certainly been good, especially with guys like what was it? Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz. You're talking about
Right.
Gardner
Cavalcade of
Minshew,
just
Anthony Richardson.
turnstile.
He's had like a whole hodgepodge of quarterbacks and still has been productive. I like that. But again, I think you felt the same way I did, where you're like, 22 million, Michael Pittman. Like, even Michael Pittman's like, wow, I'm about to get paid. Like, this is incredible.
1.21 gigawatts. And by the way, Calvin Ridley, further down this list here, coming off a very successful full 17-game season, 76 for over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's got 17 million. That's kind of the price point that I'm talking about. Anybody else that you want to hit here before we turn over to the QB room?
No, I think it's more important. There's going to be plenty of people like, are the Giants going to shop in the veteran bin? Like, think
Yeah.
about Denard Wilson might be the new defensive coordinator for the Giants. A guy that comes to mind is Jadeveon Clowney. He's someone that's bounced around and just taken different contracts. He's going to be 31 years old, but can still be productive. If you want to give him a 1 or 2 year deal and have continuity with someone like Wilson, I could see that being a good fit where you don't necessarily think about it long term, but you think about how can we make the team better now. He's just a name that I'll throw out there because if Denard Wilson gets hired, immediately he would call Jadeveon Clowney and say, "Are you interested in joining me again?"
And that being the case, when we get to free agency for the Giants specifically, we're going to go through every position and then re-highlight guys. We're not just going to talk about the guys that cost $10 to $25 million a year. We're also going to talk about bargain plays that make it possible for the Giants to improve without breaking the bank. That being the case, man, the other thing that went down here was an article coming out from credit where credit is due. Can't find the name. This is NFL Nation. So this is just a collective effort here highlighting the projection of what will happen with the QB class, not just inside the draft, but also looking at some of those big decisions. The first and foremost, just to highlight it, is the idea of former GM who was with the Bears organization when they drafted Justin Fields, coming in with a 2nd and a 7th round pick for Justin Fields, and then allowing that's Champ Kelly, who was the interim GM the last half of 2023 and was there when they drafted Fields, reuniting them. They go with Caleb Williams, and we start to move the needle. Now, there's other things like extensions they project for Kirk Cousins. He's the famous quote about it's not just about the money, but it's also about what the money signifies. You've got Baker Mayfield making a decision about that and what they'll be doing going forward. Then we get into, here's the interesting ones. Russell Wilson, cut by the Denver Broncos. Not surprising, but interesting because it opens up as a 35-year-old quarterback a bit of a wrinkle there. Now we get into free agency. They say Wilson's going to go to the Broncos. All good for you. Then we get to Gardner Minshew. Why Gardner Minshew? Because Gardner Minshew, they project to go to Denver. Denver is going to go ahead and say, hey, we're going to get our new guy in here, got to reset some things, but let's bring in some stability. Andy, what do you think the projected contract is for Gardner Minshew?
I'm going to go with a 2-year, $20 million deal.
I love it because you are grossly overestimating. The projected fit here is 2 years, $14 million, fully guaranteed. So averaging 7 AAV. Point stop right now, because we're also going to talk about Jacoby Brissett, who's projected to go to New England on a 2-year, $15 million deal. When we think about the Giants QB room, Daniel Jones, health a concern, maybe not long-term, maybe they'll draft a quarterback, Tommy DeVito. If these are the numbers, and you had mentioned Brissett going back a couple of weeks too. I think like Minshew's kind of my guy. Brissett's kind of your guy. If you tell me that I can get either one of these guys on a 2-year, $15 million deal, I am 100% jumping in on these discussions. There is no downside. It's a security blanket around Daniel Jones' health. And it also says at the end of the upcoming season, Daniel Jones, thank you so much. We did have a rookie already in here, and now we still have the veteran QB ahead of them. If these are the numbers, man, unlike the wide receiver room, I am signing the checks. I am saying I'm so lucky to have the book here of John Mara and Tish saying, yep, we can go ahead and really fix our QB room and make an improvement and offer stability over the next 2 seasons.
It's fascinating. At first, I was surprised by that number, but then you think about it, Adam. Teams either want to pay a high-end starting quarterback a lot of money, or they want to pay a backup a low amount of money that, just because they don't want to allocate so much funds to the roster. That middle ground of making $7-8 million as a backup feels like you're kind of dipping your toe in and hedging bets. You're not sure what you want. You don't want to pay them franchise money. It feels like you're kind of in limbo, which is kind of where the Giants are, not knowing Daniel Jones's health, his play, so I can understand it. What I think is fascinating, and maybe I'll throw you for a loop on this one,
Here we
but
go.
you just mentioned the Denver Broncos being the landing spot for him. It's like, okay, if he goes over there and they reset it and they wait for Russell Wilson's dead money to go off the books, Russell Wilson was guaranteed $161 million when he signed his deal in 2022,
That's right.
2 seasons ago.
Mm.
He's got the extension's just kicking in now. He's got 160 million from this contract that's been guaranteed. If he gets let go, how many teams are on the short list to say, we want Russell Wilson as our quarterback? And what if the Giants turned around and said, we don't know if Daniel Jones is going to be ready for week one. If you take a team friendly deal, you can get starter time immediately in play.
Well, how about this? Yeah, Russell Wilson, they projected him to go for a new contract with the Atlanta Falcons after being released, 3-year, 36 million, 20 million guaranteed. So you're talking about 12 million AAV, you're locked into 20, so it effectively probably ends up saying like it's a 2-year deal, right? And you can get out after he's 37 years old. I don't think it makes sense for the Giants personally, but I do understand your point of just like all of a sudden there's another guy on the market here, and the real benefit, if you want to talk about Giant centric, is if perceptually Russell Wilson is still a higher profile guy, has pedigree, has won a championship, right? That helps temper what teams are going, Gardner Minshew, Brissett, right? They go, well, Russell Wilson, if it's only going to cost me a few $1,000,000 more, yeah, at least I think that I give myself that chance. And a team like Atlanta does make sense because all these weapons, we just need a guy that we know can get it there. I think it should be marginal, the difference between some of these players at this point of their careers, but that could be beneficial for Big Blue.
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way too. You're going to have teams draft. The Bears are probably going to draft Caleb Williams. Then that means Justin Fields is probably going to be traded to another team that needs a quarterback.
Right. Talk
Then
about the
you
Raiders.
have Drake May coming off the board. Some team is going to make him their new franchise. Jaden Daniels is going to come off the board. That's 4 QB needy teams that are spots are already going to be filled. You mentioned Gardner Minshew. You mentioned Jacoby Brissett as a good bridge kind of backup to help tutor these guys. Adam, there's not that many starting NFL jobs that are open and available for even a guy like Russell Wilson or a guy like Gardner Minshew. And you start thinking like, what's more important? What the money says, as in what Kirk Cousins is talking about, or my opportunity to start and like reset my value again? The Giants are an interesting spot, like for a guy that's already got 160 million in the bank. I just think when you look at it, Pittsburgh and maybe Atlanta, there's only a handful of places. Think about Baker Mayfield being on the market. There's a ton of talent that's available there that's going to get filled up through the first 5 picks of the draft, as well as some of these free agents. It may let a veteran quarterback be out there on the cheap. And I think that's something that you mentioned with Gardner Minshew. The Giants should be exploring all of these options.
By the way, the extension that they project keeping Kirk Cousins in the Vikings building for a couple of years and letting them figure out their next move when he'll be 38 at the end of it, 2-year, $85 million. So the big money is out there, and it's based on pedigree. It's based on timelines, as you mentioned as well. Just to round this out here somewhat quickly, when we talk about, so what happens there, you mentioned, so, okay, Fields is gone. They go with Caleb Williams at 1. Commanders take Drake May at 2. Patriots go Jaden Daniels at 3. And then they had also projected to take Jacoby Brissett, right? So all these teams are looking and saying veteran now, rookie later. They have the Giants going 39, Michael Penix Jr., and they even mentioned maybe try to get into the back end of the first round for the 5th-year option. JJ McCarthy to the Vikings, letting him prepare behind Kirk Cousins. Falcons, this one I think makes, sense if they get Russell Wilson. Weird given that they have Desmond Ridder. Bo Nix, 74th for them, adding another 3rd-round quarterback into the room. Michael Pratt for the Broncos. So you see how they're projecting these things out, right? Stability now, preparing for the future later. I tell you, man, we can get out on this. I'll ask you the question, but I will give my answer first. Do you think that the Giants are willing to have the fortitude of creating a, quote, QB problem if they brought in even a Gardner Minshew and maybe your scenario, a Russell Wilson, where it's like, well, why would Daniel Jones start over either one of these guys potentially, right? I personally think these moves don't happen because the Giants don't want that mess inside of their locker room because they seem to be comfortable saying it's Daniel Jones' job. We draft a rookie, but we're willing to let him play out this final year. I think that's a mistake, but do you agree that like they might shy away from one of these guys because they don't want that, quote, controversy, which seems to be a little bit short-sighted?
Yeah, you know what else is controversial? drafting in the top 6 every single year moving forward.
Yeah.
That, like, we're not a good enough team to sit here and be like, we don't want to upset the apple cart. Like, we need to
our
be
apple
able
cart
to
stinks. It's all rotten.
Right. There's no apples in the apple cart right now. That's the way I look at it. It's a wheelbarrow with nothing inside of it.
Right.
And so for me, Adam, like, I still think that Daniel Jones can be a competent quarterback when healthy, and
Sure.
a lot of caveats around it. But also, like, I don't know, the Giants are not in a position where they necessarily owe Daniel Jones that thing. There should be QB competition, and the best person gets out there, because guess what? Brian Daboll's going to be on the chopping block if they perform poorly this year. Joe Schoen is going to be in the same boat. They can't just sit back and say, we hope his knee's good. We hope he plays better. We hope, and we don't have a backup plan. So for me, I'm okay bringing in some competition, whether it's Gardner Minshew, Brissett, even if it's Tyrod Taylor coming back, whatever you think will help the team room, I am all for it.
Yep. And it's the same exact scenario. Daniel Jones not ready. Minshew starts. Doesn't look too good. You give Daniel Jones some run. It's okay. It's okay to have these problems. You are not a championship run team this upcoming season. So go ahead and give yourself options. That being the case, guys, whoo, baby, what a way to close out the week here. We've, of course, got the big game coming up. So we'll talk about that a little bit, highlight some players to keep your eyes on, obviously. Going to have some fun, give our official picks. And then we'll continue to work our way through the free agency class. In the meantime, when we think about securing all of these key positional needs, we also think about our friends over at Personam. That is because Personam is an AI-driven cyber threat detection engine. It improves your vision into your network security environment and allows you to see cyber threats that other tools and platforms just can't do. Personam is always vigilant, always learning. Check out Personam today, and also check out One Giant Podcast over on YouTube, at AndyMac214, at Adam Armbrecht, and at One Giant Podcast on Twitter. And please, wherever you get your podcast needs fulfilled, leave a glowing review, share it with your friends and family. And we have officially a onegiantpodcast.com website. We'll be seeing some article content and other great features for you to continue to just saturate yourself with Giants content. Help support us. We really appreciate it. Until next time, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.